Welcome everybody back to Crayonsplainer, where I use crayons to explain stupid ass stuff to stupid ass people making stupid ass claims. Today we're dealing with some flat earth shit again. So this is stupid flat earth claims. This is going to deal with a flat earther claim. How does a pressurized system exist next to a vacuum? So, Sorry, my case of S.I.R.F.S just kicked in. If you don't know what S.I.R.F.S is, I've got a little helper thing here. So S.I.R.F.S is the sudden involuntary reactive facepalm syndrome, most commonly caused by repetitive exposure to idiotic ideas, resulting in an automatic reaction of facepalming when exposed to overwhelming amounts of repeated dumbassery. It just kicked in. I fucking facepalm myself pretty hard right there, but it's all good. I've got medication. So, so how does a pressurized system exist next to a vacuum? So let's go over the claim here really quick. So thanks to my fantastic art skills, I have produced a kind of a model of what we have, what these guys are talking about here. We've got the Earth, 100% accurate depiction of the Earth, as you can tell by this almond-shaped South America, and totally to scale atmosphere relative to the size of the Earth and space and shit. So flat earthers claim that so we have the Earth and we have our atmosphere, and outside the atmosphere we have space, and space is a vacuum. And so flat earthers are like, well, how can this pressurized atmosphere exist next to a vacuum? Wouldn't the vacuum just like suck everything out and suck the atmosphere right off the face of the Earth? And in trying to explain this to these retards, you've got to really understand the number one enemy of flat earthers, which of course is gravity. Flat earthers don't understand gravity, and they're more than willing to dismiss gravity, because if they can admit that gravity exists, it debunks their whole concept. Like, flat Earth cannot exist if gravity exists. Like, if you have a flat Earth, if the Earth is flat and gravity exists, gravity is going to pull all of this shit on the flat Earth into a sphere, as we know is reality. Like, we know all planetary bodies and solar body, every object in space is essentially a sphere. I mean, you've got asteroids and comets and shit that might not be perfect spheres, but they're circular, maybe oblong or whatever. But it is because of gravity that things become spherical. It's the most efficient shape in space. But flat earthers deny that gravity is even a thing because they know it debunks their whole theory. And then the more stupid flat earthers, since they're like, oh yeah, gravity can exist because Earth's flat, so they don't understand how this whole thing works here. And they're like, well, oh, okay, so if there's an Earth, a spherical Earth with an atmosphere surrounded by this vacuum, how come the vacuum doesn't just suck everything off of the Earth? Well, you're fucking idiots, for one. Gravity does exist, and the main thing here is a vacuum is not a force. Okay? If you're on Earth and you have a little container and you suck all the air out of it and create a vacuum, it seems like it's a force, but it's not a force. A vacuum is an absence of a force. It's an absence of pressure, and that pressure is caused by a gravitational pull. Okay? So all this space out here is essentially a vacuum, but that vacuum is not a force. It's the result of the force of gravity pulling shit into a spherical object such as Earth. Okay, so let's go through this real quick, and let's kind of go over like how the Earth was formed. God damn it! What? Whoa, shit! Fucking critical breakdown. What's going on here? Oh fuck. Okay. We're back on track. So let's look at this right here, and let's say this is kind of our galaxy in formation. Okay, not our galaxy. Well, maybe our galaxy, but more specifically our solar system. We had this explosion from the Big Bang. We had stars coalescing, nuclear fission going on, more explosions, supernovas, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. We get out here. So let's get to our solar system. So we have all these particles, okay? All these bits of dust, rock, whatever, gases and shit. Every little black point right here is some form of matter, okay? So each little particle has its gravitational pull. Now, flat earthers always say, oh, well, scientists don't even know what gravity is. Okay, and for one part, yeah, you're right. Like, we don't know exactly what gravity is. To break it down a little further, we don't know what is the actual cause of gravity. Like, we don't know what it is in an atom or a molecule that causes this attractive force, but we do know that it exists. We do know that there is this force in every atom or every molecule, so forth, that has an attractive force to everything around it. Okay, so let's take this little bit here. This little dot, let's say it's like a tiny little grain of sand floating out in the vacuum of space, and you can tell it's a vacuum because I kind of lazily drew some black lines here to indicate space. So this little grain of sand has this force pulling in on it from all directions. And each one of these little dots has the same attractive force of gravity pulling in on it to everything that's around it. So this one's pulling in from everywhere, this one's pulling in from everywhere, this one's pulling in from everywhere. And so this one and this one, they also have these gravitational pulls pulling in from every direction. And the closer they are, the stronger that, well, it's not a stronger pull, but it's going to act, their gravitational pulls are going to act upon each other stronger than things that are further apart from them. So the closer they are, the more effective the pull of gravity is on the two things. So everywhere, all these little particles, all these little bits of dust, grains of sand, little rocks, each one of them has their own pull on everything around them. Okay? So if things are closer, like these two, they're going to pull stronger than this one is going to pull on this one or this one. And these two are going to pull together stronger than this one is to, say, this one. Okay? So all these particles have gravity. Every single one of them is acting on every single other one of them. Okay? So over a vast amount of time, all these particles tend to conglomerate to the closer of the ones that are in their vicinity. Okay? So they start to cluster up, and grains of sand pull other ones, and they group up. So I made some of these center dots a little bit darker to explain that, because that's smaller groups of the individual dots of matter. They're grouping up into clusters. So instead of having all these singular points kind of uniformly, but not really uniformly spread out in space, over time they have attracted to each other and grouped up into these little groups of matter. And similarly to before, every single group, every little bit of matter is still pulling on each other. Like this one is still gravitated to the bigger mass. So as these grains of sand or little rocks group up and they actually touch each other and form a larger object, all of the mass is essentially combined, and all of the gravity is essentially combined. So they group up into bigger and bigger bits of pieces. And all of the smaller ones that they're still trying to make their way to the center of the gravitational pull, they're still making their way in. So all these little outside ones are still making their way in. And even the bigger ones on the inside are making their way in, because there's like a cumulative effect of all the gravity in a certain area going towards the center, the equilibrium of all of the gravity. So all of this is going on, assuming that there isn't some bigger object somewhere off in the vicinity that's going to pull all of it towards it, or all of it up this way, all of it that way. It's assuming that everything is essentially pretty much uniformly spaced out and in similar size. If there's one object that's quite a bit bigger, that's going to be the center point of gravity for everything that's around it in a semi-local area. So even though we have all these groups and all these little points are attracted to the stronger point of the bigger objects, each one of these groups is doing that, trying to get to the center point, but they're also attracted to the entirety of the area, essentially. So you have all these little bits kind of attracted to the center of this little point, and the same thing is going on in this group of little bits, but at the same time, all of these are attracted to all of these. So this group has its pull towards it. This group has its pull towards it. But this group and this group are pulled towards each other. And that's the same for this group and this group. This group and this group. This group and this group. And even this group and this group. Like they're all pulling towards each other as the individual bits are all pulling towards each other. Okay? And outside of all of these groups of little bits, it's all vacuum. Even in between all these little bits, it's all vacuum. Okay? So let's go over another expansive amount of time. So all those little groups of bits have essentially gravitated towards each other and formed a major point of mass with some little bits of outliers. Like most of the bits of mass have all gravitated towards and connected. We've still got a few little bits out here still making their way in, but you know, give it time and they'll all do that. And so they're all kind of conglomerating, they're all grouping up, and there's more and more and more empty space out here, more and more vacuum out here. So all these groups are still, all the little bits are trying to go towards the center mass, yet every single one of these groups is still, like, they're still pulling everything towards them. All the little bits, they're all still getting pulled towards this major point of mass. And yet every group of major mass and little bits are all getting pulled towards the equilibrium of the gravity pulling towards a certain center point. Like, each group is pulling the little bits towards itself, and it's also pulling the bigger groups towards itself. And so if you look at like the 6 that I have here, the center point is going to be right about here. So all the little bits are going in, little bits going in. They're all doing that, but at the same time, this one is pulling on this one, this one's pulling on this one, this one's pulling on this one, this one's pulling on this one. They're all kind of finding their gravitational equilibrium, which would be in the center of all of them, respectively. So let's give a whole bunch more time. And this is what you're going to get. You're going to get all of the little bits, all of the little groups, all condensed into their own little points, and then all pulled to each other to form a singular mass. Okay? Jesus Christ. My fucking S.I.R.F.S just activated again. I need to invest in some oven mitts. This shit's getting out of control. So this is why we know that gravity, although we don't know exactly what causes the force of gravity, we observe that gravity does exist. We know it has a pull. We can measure it. We know the vector. We know that bodies of mass attract other bodies of mass, and this is why things come into a spherical shape. Now, in the mind of a flat earther, let's say this is a two-dimensional thing. We have a disk. This is the flat earth. And there's no three-dimensionality to this. because of gravity, a flat Earth cannot exist. Gravity would pull all the edges in, and the disc would collapse upon itself and form a sphere. That is what we observe in reality on Earth as we look at the moon, as we look at the sun, as we look at all the other planets, as we look at all the other galaxies and the other solar system, every single other planetary or any other single mass of matter that we look at in the universe is essentially a sphere. Okay? Like, that is why, because gravity exists. And so, to address the question, how can this exist right next to a vacuum? A vacuum isn't a force. A vacuum is the absence of the force. It's the absence of matter and the accrued gravity of all of the matter that has coalesced into this sphere. A gravity isn't going to fucking rip the atmosphere off the Earth. It's not going to rip the surface off. It doesn't fucking work like that, because that's not what a vacuum is. A vacuum, such as the vacuum of space outside of the Earth, is the absence of physical matter, because all of that physical matter has been drawn into the spherical shape of, for instance, Earth, or the Sun, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, etc. A vacuum is not an active force. It is the absence of the force of gravity and the matter that gravity can pull in. Like, quit fucking saying this, because if you don't understand this, you are in obvious denial of reality. You're an obvious idiot that doesn't understand gravity and physics, and you're just making yourself look like a total fucking retard to anybody that doesn't know better than you. Okay? Gravity exists. Gravity is pretty much the explanation for most of the physical universe that we see. And that's why all flat earthers have to deny the existence of gravity, because gravity alone debunks all of their stupid ass bullshit. Okay? The atmosphere isn't gonna fly off into a vacuum. The vacuum is not the force. The gravity is the force that pulled all the shit that was in the vacuum into a singular conglomerate, the singular coalescence. And obviously the heavier elements like dirt, rock, soil, lead, gold, whatever, all this shit gets pulled further, and the gases that make up the atmosphere are lighter than the solids. Okay? So that's why, like, the iron, the minerals, the water, that's why that is all a part of the solid earth. And all of the gases, which are very much lighter than the solids, are our atmosphere. And there is a gradient, okay? There is a definite gradient from the surface of the earth to the outside of the atmosphere. There's an obvious gradient, because the vacuum is not pulling out, the gravity is pulling in. And as the higher layers of atmosphere are pulled in, the higher levels of the atmosphere are thinner. They're further away from the center of gravity, so the pull is a little bit less. though it is constantly there, but it thins out. And that's the same reason why even on the Earth, so on the Earth, the surface of the Earth, we have the oceans. At sea level, we have a certain pressure. Okay? And flat earthers, they like to say that, oh, buoyancy and density, that's why things rise or fall. Okay, so let's look at the surface of the ocean. Okay, we have a constant pressure. Let's say you go 1 foot under the surface of the ocean, you have a certain pressure. Okay, let's go to the very bottom of the ocean. It's still water. It's all water. It's all H2O. It's all water molecules. No one water molecule is any denser than another water molecule. So how come at the very bottom of the ocean, the pressure is so much fucking higher? Like, I watched a video not too long ago of students that used a crab trap, and they put styrofoam cups inside their crab trap, and they dropped it to the bottom of the ocean, left it there for a little bit, pulled it back up, and the styrofoam cups were just like scrunched down into little miniature Weasley little fucking limp dick versions of the styrofoam cups. So how come at the very bottom of the ocean there's so much more pressure than 1 foot below sea level? If all those water molecules are the same density, they're all the same weight, and buoyancy works however the fuck you say it does, how come at the very bottom of the ocean there's a higher pressure? All the water molecules are the same density. There shouldn't be a gradient in pressure. You fucking idiots. The same goes for the atmosphere. At surface level, we have a high atmospheric pressure, and as you go up, the gradient gets thinner and thinner, lighter and lighter, until essentially you get into outer space, into orbit. Okay? Gravity is the source of why things are spherical, why the Earth is a sphere, why flat Earth is bullshit, and the whole reason why all this can exist next to a vacuum is because a vacuum is not a fucking force. It's the absence of matter due to gravity pulling all the matter into a singular fucking thing. And vacuum, god damn it, vacuum is the absence of substance because gravity has pulled all the shit into something. Okay, get this through your fucking heads, you dumbass flat earthers. You don't know a fucking thing about anything. You're all fucking stupid. Like, listen, like this shit has been explained over and over and over, and I even fucking busted out my goddamn crayons to explain it again, so hopefully that you can understand it. Peace the fuck out. Go fuck yourselves, flat earthers. I'm done.